Okay, welcome to part 3 of creating a video slideshow using Adobe Premiere. In the last section, we looked at adding some effects to our timeline. We added 3 effects, and then we added a title, and we dissolved that title in and dissolved it out. So we're starting to make some progress here, and the next thing we want to look at is actually working with our audio a little bit more. Because right now we have just a plain soundtrack that we've dumped into our timeline, and it plays back under our video just fine. But you'll notice that what happens at the end here is if I scroll to the end, what's going to happen is my video is going to stop, but my music is going to keep going. And that's because my music is actually a lot longer than the video that I'm editing together, the actual content that's in the timeline. So there's a couple of things I want to do here. The first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to actually trim down this music so that it stops at the right time. It stops when my video actually ends and it doesn't keep going on forever. So the easiest way to do this is to use what's called the razor tool. The razor tool is over here in your tools panel, which is over in the lower right hand side, and it just looks like a little razor blade. And so when you click on that, it changes your mouse to a little razor blade, and what I can do is I can line this up right where my video ends, and I can just click it once. What that does, it actually splits the two audio clips in half. So it's still one consistent audio piece, but it's now split into two separate clips, so I can move them independently of each other. And then I move back to my selection tool, which is the arrow, and now I can select each of them independently, like I said. And I can actually select this one, and if I hit delete on my keyboard, I can just remove it from the timeline. So now what happens, and at the end of my video, is my video and my music ends at the same time. The problem is it just cuts off, right? And that's not very nice. It's not a very nice, smooth transition. So I can actually fade out my audio by adding an effect to it to make it fade over time and make a much smoother transition. I can do this over in my effects panel. You have your audio transitions, and I can go and select under crossfade. I can use this one called constant power. That's the most common one. It's the nicest effect that they have for audio fades. And you can just drop it into your timeline right at the end here, and it's just like adding an effect where on the video where you drop it or you put it over, it's going to highlight, and then when you drop it, the fade is going to happen. Okay, so you see the little constant right here. And I can play it back. And it's actually fading now. And it fades not too bad. It's a little bit fast for my liking. So there's a couple of ways that I can change the length of time that the fade actually happens. One is, just like I do for changing the length of a video effect, is I can just double click on it, and I can go up here and adjust the duration. I can adjust it by typing in a number, or I can adjust it by clicking and holding my mouse down and scrubbing either to the right or to the left to make it longer or shorter. The other thing that I can do, there is more than one way to achieve the same thing in Premiere. The other thing I can do is I can just put my mouse over the edge of where the audio fade actually starts, and you'll see it turns into this funny cursor, 2 arrows and a red bracket. And if I actually drag this, I can then also change the length or the amount of time that fade actually takes. So there's a few different ways that you can tweak that. So that's a good fade. I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so now I have my audio fading out at the end. I've added the effect that allows that to happen. There's another way you can control your audio as well that we'll just review quickly. Sometimes during your video, you may want the audio level to go up and down, and this might happen sort of in the middle here. If you bring the audio down to add a sound effect, or bring the audio down to add a voice track or something like that. And so you want to be able to control the audio within the timeline and not just on the ends of your clips. So the first thing we're going to do is this down here you see two big triangles and two little triangles. The big triangles allow you to zoom your timeline in. This is a really handy thing for you when you start to do some more fine detailed work. So it's just like taking a magnifying glass and zooming in that timeline so that you can see really up close what's going on in all of your different areas. It still plays at the same speed. As you can see, it's just giving you a much more magnified view of the timeline. This is a good thing when you're starting to control some of the finer details of your clip. So let's say that at just about this point here, we'll just move our timeline controller right back to here. And at this point, let's say that we want to bring the audio down, fade it down a little bit, and then have it come back up. So what we can do is we can actually add a point on the timeline right here called a keyframe. And if you see here, there's a little toggle switch here that says Show Keyframes. Okay, and you want to make sure that that toggle is on. It should be by default. And then you take your pen tool, which is this tool right over here on your toolbar, and you click that, and then you're going to position it right on top of the yellow line that sits right across your audio track here. And I'm going to click that once, and it's going to add a little dot, and that little dot is a keyframe. And then I'm going to click and I'm going to add a second keyframe. Now I have two keyframes on my timeline. I'll go back to my selection tool, and now what I can do is I can click and drag my keyframe around. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually lowering or raising the audio level depending on what I want to do. So now if I let that go, you'll see that it actually fades. I'll just go back a bit here. Fades my audio out right at that point. And you could fade it all the way out, or you could fade it just a little bit of the way out. It's up to you. And then if I want it to fade back in at a certain point, I would just add two more keyframes. Go back to my selection tool, and then I could raise the audio up again. So now if I do that, you can see it fades out and fades back in. And this is a technique known as rubber banding, and it's something that you'll see in a lot of different programs you're going to be using in this course, or in the whole program that you're doing, where you can make some very fine detailed controls of your audio sources. So that's how you tweak with your audio. It takes a bit of practice to get used to, but play around with it, and if you do want to erase your keyframes after you've done them, then you can actually just select the keyframe, and if I select it, you see it sort of turns a gold color. Select the keyframe, right click, and just hit delete. The other thing I can do is I can just click it and drag it right out of my timeline as well. So a couple of different ways to achieve the same thing. Takes a little bit of practice, play around with it and see how you do. In the next section, we're going to look at adding some motion effects to our videos.